everybody, and welcome to a special episode of the USBL here on the JohnJake Baseball channel. We're out here using MLB The Show 21 on that PS5 because that's how we do it over here, man. And we've seen some good regular season baseball, don't get me wrong. First 2 months, we've seen some surprises, like the Honolulu Islanders, best record in the league right now, 35-15 to start off the first couple of seasons, or the first couple of months of his second season of the USBL. But we've also seen some disappointments as well. We do see that the Chicago Freeze, they are the defending World Series champions, but here in season number 2, they have struggled mightily. Despite the roster that they have on paper, they are 22-26 right now, 4 games under 500, and they are 7 games back in the division right now. So it's been a tough go for the Chicago Freeze, that is for sure. But with that being said, it's all about the USBL amateur draft, where the future of this game is born. And Nashville Blues, they start on the clock, man. I believe they do have the #1 overall pick, but with that being said, I hope you guys are excited for today's USBL Year 2 amateur draft for the USBL. And if you are, make sure you go ahead and smack that like button for me. Hit me up down in the comments down below with either your thoughts about how this draft goes, or if you want to have a custom prospect, I will have a custom prospect template in the description. And of course, if you're brand new to the channel, by the way, make sure you hit that subscribe button, man. I love interacting with new people for this community, growing the baseball channel. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this year's USBL draft. So just as I suspected, the Nashville Blues are on the clock, and they are going to go ahead and get things started here, man. We got 12 blue chip prospects here for the Nashville Blues, so of course they are going to go ahead and get themselves probably one of these blue chip prospects, but the real question is, though, which direction do they want to go? There's a couple places they could go to. They could go to right field, for example, 80 potential, 50 overall. They could also go to shortstop Brett Praffer. He's also an 80 overall, 50 potential. Richard Alvilles, third baseman as well. So definitely plenty of options here. And then, of course, Guadalupe Sierra. Now, Guadalupe Sierra is definitely an interesting player. 80 potential, 60 overall. He is a international prospect and has a tendency to kind of hit towards the sides of the field, mostly, between left field and right field. Rarely hits it, right down the center. Definitely has great potential. His overall is pretty good. It's above average. So, I mean, that being said, Guadalupe Sierra, he is going to be the first overall pick in the USBL draft. Next up, we have the Denver Bald Eagles, who are now on the clock. They are getting the second overall pick, and Denver is a team, they are definitely in the middle of their rebuild right now. They don't have a ton of talent, really, besides Brandon Rowe, Sean Murphy, Dustin May. There's not really a lot of talent to go with here, and they certainly really do need a ton of help right now. There's a few different directions they could go to. They could go Aubrey Ulysses. They could also go George Vargas as well if they wanted to do that. Daniel Sierra is also an option here as well. Luis Ybarra as well. And then Elliot Parker, is a second baseman. But again, there's a ton of different ways that they could go about this. But that being said, though, Denver's biggest weakness right now is they need some serious bullpen help right now. They are not very good in their bullpen right now. They need somebody that could come in and be a difference maker in the bullpen, and potentially George Vargas could potentially be that player. I know he's a little older, 23 years old, but he's a 60 overall. Again, above average, has phenomenal potential, and I think it makes sense for the Denver Bald Eagles to select George Varis to the Denver Ball Eagles. Up next now is the Columbus Jets, who do currently have the 3rd overall pick in the USBL draft, but thanks to some of the changes that they've made to the roster, I mean, they got Clayton Kershaw, for example, to really bolster this roster. They don't have a ton of weaknesses. They're really only weak in 2 spots right now: 3rd base and right field. Now, there happens to be 2 choices for Columbus between Dominic James, who is, a right fielder himself, or they can go with Richard Aviles. Now, Richard Aviles has a 2026 or later USBL ETA, but his potential is just off the wall right now. 80 potential. He is slightly above average in terms of his hitting as well, with a 55 overall to go with it. Tends to hit more towards the left field side. This would make a lot of sense, and he's also a player that is pretty good, solid all around. Definitely has some good contact hitting statistics. Needs to work on his power a little bit, but Richard Aviles is going to be the pick for the Columbus Jets, the 3rd baseman being the 3rd overall pick. So that now leaves with Milwaukee, who does have the 4th overall pick in this draft. And Milwaukee is a team, of course, that, despite how well that they've been doing as of late, they have plenty of needs that they need to work on. They need a first baseman, they need some starting pitching, bullpen help, a shortstop, and a catcher to top all of that off as well. Thankfully, there is plenty of options that they could go with, leaning towards either Luis Ybarra. He's an 80 potential, 60 overall, or they could also, go towards the bullpen. Jason Kaminsky's here. Walter Chen is here. This is a great draft in general if you want to address pitching with a younger prospect. Daniel Ciara is also here as well. 80 overall, 60 potential. And then Brad Preifer's here as well. He's also a start. There's a lot of ways that Milwaukee can go in order to address some of their needs here with this 4th overall pick. With that being said, in terms of starting pitching though, out of the blue chip prospects that are still available to be selected, Daniel Ciara has the closest USBL ETA. He's projected to be there in 25 as a full-time player. He's only 19 years old, also from the Dominican Republic, 60 overall, 80 potential. This is a guy, he's got some great stamina already, needs to work on his ability to strike out hitters as well as his accuracy, I believe. His arm accuracy, playing in the field. But Daniel Ciara will be a great pick for Milwaukee here at number 4. Now, Atlanta is a team that is here selecting in the 5th overall pick range, but this is also a team that could very much be there in the top 5 again next year with the way that they've started so far. So they definitely could use some help, to say the least, and getting a blue chip prospect that will definitely help their case right now. They do have a couple of needs: second baseman, a starting pitcher, get themselves a first baseman, or even a catcher, although there is not necessarily a catcher that is available right now, at least among the blue chip prospects, so that could be a 2nd round thing. But in terms of starting pitchers, Atlanta is really looking hard at Luis Ybarra here. Now, Luis Ybarra, he's from Puerto Rico. A lot of international prospects getting selected early. Got phenomenal stamina, has phenomenal reaction time, so he's got good defensive potential. Does need to work on his arm accuracy a little bit, and only has an average arm out in the field. But that being said, he's got good fundamental stuff, has some solid pitching staffs to work with. The Atlanta Barons are certainly going to be extremely happy about selecting Luis Ybarra here with the 5th overall pick. Next up is the San Antonio Outlaws, who are selecting with the 6th overall pick in the USBL draft as we go ahead and see what they could be needing. There's still 7 possible blue chip prospects that they can go ahead and get after. Now, they do need a second baseman, a first baseman, as well as a starting pitcher as well. That is the few positions that they are really weak at. Now, they can either go Elliot Parker here. He is a second baseman that's 22 years old. But what they're going to do here, actually, they're looking at Aubrey Ulysses. Now, Aubrey is from Florida. He is the definition of a Florida man. But the knock on him, though, is that he does give up a few home runs. So that's not very good. So he needs some time, needs some seasoning at the minor league levels. But that being said, though, he's got great velocity. It got great breaking ball stuff. Very good fielder as well. Needs to work on the arm accuracy, but seems like a very good defender. Needs some seasoning with the pitching. Needs to get his stamina up. Only 60 stamina as a starter. That's not great, but that being said, Aubrey Ulysses will be a pick here at number 6. So that brings the Louisville Colonials on the board now, and Louisville, they got quite a few needs. They need a lot. I mean, they need a third baseman, catcher. They need some bullpen help. They need some outfielder help as well to go with it. And there's only 6 blue chip prospects that are left, that are still currently available. They don't necessarily need a shortstop or a second baseman because they're actually pretty strong at those 2 positions. But that being said, though, one thing that they could do, they could maybe address their bullpen. They could use some bullpen help that, needs to be worked on as of right now. Or another thing that they can do, they can go towards the outfield as well. Now, they're looking at the closing pitchers, and they're looking at either Walter Chen here or Jason Kaminsky, who is a little bit younger. They have a similar potential, similar overall. He is 21 years old. Also, again, the Dominican Republic just out here doing some fantastic stuff right now, I guess, with their amateur prospects. Now, he doesn't have very good stamina, but that's okay. You're a closing pitcher, so that's fine. Really is pretty well-rounded. Needs to work on his defense a little bit with the arm accuracy, but he is scouted to have very good potential in terms of that kind of stuff. His velocity is fantastic. 80 velocity out of 80. That's really good because the scouting scale is at an 80. Already has close to an 100-mile-per-hour fastball. The potential is there, and the Louisville Colonials are going to select Jason Kaminsky to address that bullpen. Up next is the Boston Quakers, and the Boston Quakers, they are a lot better of a team than they were in season 1. They rebounded in the second half of the season. I thought they were going to have the worst record in the USBL, but they move up. They got to really the 8th overall pick in this USBL draft. And it's still in a position where they can get some blue chip prospects. They do need some help with starting pitching. They could also try to get a left fielder or a center fielder, but there's really only one blue chip prospect that really makes sense for the Boston Quakers. It's Charlton Ponson. He is a Texas-born guy. Definitely hits more towards the left field side, so that's kind of consistent with his right-handed batting as well as a right-handed pit in the field. Has decent power, decent contact, doesn't really have much to work on except maybe that arm accuracy a little bit. Does have fantastic speed and fantastic stealing ability, so he'll be aggressive out there on the base paths. So the Boston Quakers will select Charlton Ponson with the 8th overall pick in the USBL draft. Now we have the Pittsburgh Force, who were previously known as the Detroit Leopards last season, but that being said, though, the Detroit Leopards are not the force of habit. The Pittsburgh Force, they're looking a lot better. They're actually looking like a competitive team, but they still have some things that they can work on. They could use a center fielder. They could use a shortstop, but guess what? There happens to be a shortstop that is a blue chip prospect in Brett Praver. Now, Brett Praver, not as high of an overall as maybe some of the other blue chip prospects, but still 80 potential guy. 21 years old, so he's still relatively young, has a couple years of collegiate baseball experience, and he does need some help at the plate. He doesn't really do anything well at the plate, and he's only an average defender. But what gets scouts excited is that speed. 75 speed, 80 steal. He's certainly quick. He is more of a developmental prospect, more of a project player, but Pittsburgh has time as they're trying to rebuild and retool this squad a little bit after a disappointing season 1. So the Pittsburgh Force will select Brett Praver. Now, Las Vegas was a team that was not very good. They are, of course, selecting with that 10th overall pick. They got a couple things that they can work on as well. They do need a third baseman. They do need some more depth at shortstop, as well as second base. Now, that being said, there is a second base prospect available in Elliot Parker, who, at least to Las Vegas, they have a 60 overall. They really like what he could possibly do. Does have a long ETA, but at 22 years old, it is what it is. Only an average hitter, needs to work on his vision and discipline for sure, but he should be a pretty solid fielder from the jump and has great speed to go with it as well, so he'll be extremely quick. This is a guy that they can, if they can get his batting statistics up, he can be a very good second baseman for a long time, a potential franchise second baseman per se, and Elliot Parker will be the pick. He'll be selected with the 10th overall selection in the USBL draft. So the Jacksonville Suns are the next team on the clock. They are currently holding the number 11 selection, and there's only two blue chip guys left, right field and this closing pitcher, Walter Chen. Now, Jacksonville Suns, they need a catcher, they need some corner infielders, and also bullpen help, unsurprisingly. And Walter Chen could definitely help out in that regard. 23 years old, from South Korea, so yet another international prospect for sure. And this is a guy who's got great breaking ball stuff, really good velocity to go with it, and is a solid fielder with the exception of his arm accuracy, but he does make that up with his reaction time. He's very good at reacting to the baseball, so the Jacksonville Suns will select Walter Chen in the USBL draft as the 11th overall pick. So the Phoenix Firebirds are up next. They were the biggest winners of USBL free agency, but that being said though, checking a look at what the Phoenix Firebirds need, they need a center fielder, they need starting pitching. They also could use some help with, left field, right field. Actually, no, that's actually their strengths. And Dominic James, I know he is a blue chip prospect, he's really good, but they're strong at right field right now, so it actually really would not make much sense for them to go out and get themselves a right fielder. That it just wouldn't be it for them, to be honest with you. So they don't need him, to be honest. At the end of the day, I don't know what I was trying to go with that. I mean, especially because they have Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge is a guy, he should be on that team for a very long time. So they're going to go someone who's pretty relatively scouted, Doug Bennett. Only 65 potential though, 50 overall. He's 22 years old though, so a little bit of a head scratching pick, a little bit of a surprise for Phoenix, but that's what the way that they're gonna go. They're gonna select Doug Benitez in with the 12th overall pick. So that leaves the San Diego Whales. Now, they weren't necessarily expecting the opportunity to go ahead and select a blue chip prospect, but Dominic James falls right into their lap. Right fielder, 80 potential, 50 overall. They weren't expecting to have him, but he's got a decent pull out to left field for the fact that he is a left-handed hitter, can also play in left field and center field. So this is a steal for the San Diego Whales. Dominic James being selected to the Whales without any hesitation. So now things get really interesting here for the rest of this draft, as we are now officially out of blue chip prospects, and it looks like the Memphis Bobcats, who are selecting number 14 overall, they are a little bit out of luck as of right now, because this is a place where they need quite a bit of a lot of things. Left field and first baseman, that's two things that they don't need necessarily as of right now. But that being said, though, they could use a lot. Now, there's a couple of solid things that they could go ahead and go for. Maybe they go for a Leonard Floyd, who is, 65 potential. That's really solid. Could also go Dominique Gonzalez. He's also pretty solid. Same thing with Burke Kirtland, Luis Rosoto, and Ozzie Lugo. But one of the needs that the Memphis Bobcats do have in terms of talent is the second base position, and Ozzie Lugo certainly fits that bill. 21 years old, 60 overall, 65 potential. pretty solid player all around. Doesn't do anything great. He is a very good fielder, but he's not elite in really any category. So that does make you question how much he can develop. So Ozzie Lugo will be the selection here at number 14. The Aurora Lightning, on the other hand, though, they have the 15th overall selection. They are in potential need of one of those guys that, could be either they need a center fielder, or they could get themselves a first baseman as well. As checking a look on just scouting board, and unfortunately, it seems like one of those things where Aurora just had a really difficult time scouting. So really, they don't really have anybody. Aurora already in the first round kind of seems like that they are, making those shots in the dark right now, but few different directions that they could go with. They could either go with center field. Center field's looking really good. There's a 75 potential guy. Or they could go out to first base. There's an 80 potential guy. But Pablo Francisco, only a 45 overall. So he's slightly below average. Has some things he needs to work on. Power's not necessarily there. And he's not going to be very fast either. So Pablo Francisco will be the pick, but how patient are the Aurora Lightning going to be given, the numerous options that they do have there at first base already? Named William Maria. Now, William Maria is listed as 80 potential, but he's not very well scouted. Only a 55 overall, so we don't know how true that stuff's going to be. He does struggle with in terms of his walk, so that tells me he doesn't have very much control. He does have an elite reaction time, very good fielder, and has great breaking ball stuff. I mean, the potential is certainly there. He can certainly throw hard, and for someone that does throw hard, he doesn't give up too many hits, or he doesn't necessarily give up a ton of home runs. So the Charlotte Cougars will go ahead and select William Mora. The New York Knights are on deck with the 17th overall selection, and unlike some other teams in the USBL, New York actually did a pretty good job of scouting more than just beyond the good old-fashioned, oh, these are the blue chip prospects, we should, not really worry about the rest of them. But New York, they actually did their homework this time around, and there's two really good players with high potential, Demetrius Forbes and Tommy Basser, both of which are the catcher position, and both of which are players that could fill a need. New York does have a position of weakness at that catcher position right now, and Forbes, 22 years old, from Montana. Don't see a lot of folks from Montana. Does not hit the ball very well. Is a very good defensive catcher, though, although his arm is a little bit average. Not the most exciting player on the face of the planet, but Demetrius Forbes, I'm sure, will be a great success for one of these days when Yasmani Grandal is done playing in the USBL. As for the Honolulu Islanders, they do have the 18th overall selection in the USBL draft. And the Honolulu Islanders, they could use a shortstop, right field, or second base. And look at who's available for Morel Hughes. They are high on this guy. 80 potential, only a 50 overall, though. He does have an ETA of 2026 or later, and not very big either. Only 5'8", 194 pounds. You know, a below average hitter. Needs to work on his discipline at the plate, among other things. And just is really an average player right now, but they do like, you know, he did play the game of baseball. He just started recently, and he's only 19 years old too, so he's not even that old. He's got good speed, and he's got great stealing abilities as well to go with it. So the Honolulu Islanders are going to go ahead and take a chance here, and they're going to select Merrill Hughes, the right fielder from Pennsylvania. Now up next is the Indianapolis Indians, and Indianapolis, with their free agent acquisitions, they really are only in need of one thing and one thing only. They just need a center fielder here in the future. I mean, they got Fred Shaver right now. They also have Joe Adell, who's a promising prospect, but there's not really that much depth behind those two guys necessarily, so it seems like a good idea for them to go ahead and address that center fielder position a little bit. Dave Cannon is available. He's a 75 potential, also a 55 overall. He is an average hitter, really, you know, not very good with the power numbers. He does have great stealing. He does have really good speed, borderline elite speed. Only 20 years old too, from the state of Michigan. And so the Indianapolis Indians are going to keep him in the Midwest and select Dave Cannon with the 19th overall pick. The Baltimore Stone Crabs are on deck with the 20th overall selection. And again, Baltimore already in a position where they kind of have to go ahead and take some shots in the dark. It's not really a good look for them whatsoever. You know, some of these scouting departments certainly struggling, and we'll see how much that really affects them. But they are looking at center fielder Brian Hernandez. Actually, yeah, Brian Hernandez. Brian Hernandez, you know, is a center fielder. Could be a nice add, but he's not very big at all. Only 5'7", 156 pounds to go with it as well. He is listed with 80 potential, 60 overall. Even though it's a shot in the dark, you got to take that risk. Even though he may not turn into an elite hitter, he can turn into a good fielder and can use his speed to his advantage, steal some bases, and can affect the game that way. So Brian Hernandez will be selected by the Baltimore Stone Crabs for the 20th overall selection. So this goes ahead and takes us to the Washington Senators, who are on deck, and they do have the 21st overall selection in the USBL draft. Now, they could use some help at the starting pitching rotation, and David Chavez is here and definitely available. Another Dominican Republic guy. Seems like these Dominican Republic guys are just dominating this USBL first round. There's certainly quite a few of them. A few things that he does struggle with. He does struggle with striking batters out and does give up more home runs than maybe what some USBL draft boards are comfortable with, but he does have really good stamina already. Good at making sure that he doesn't allow a lot of hits as well to go with it, and he's got great reaction time as well. So he's got some things that he needs to work on, that is for sure. But David Chavez, even though he might not be an elite prospect, he'll go very well with this Washington Senators team at number 21. So this takes us to the Seattle Pilots, and even though the Seattle Pilots are selecting at number 22, this is also a team that's a little down bad right now. I mean, they lost quite a few free agent acquisitions. They took a huge L with that. They don't have anyone over 90 overall anymore, like they used to when Aaron Judge was on the squad. And they got some needs. You know, they need some starting pitching, catcher, second baseman, shortstop. They need a bullpen. They need quite a few things right now is really what I'm trying to go ahead and say. But how about this? David Klaus is available. And yes, he's not scouted very much, unfortunately, but Dave Klaus, 80 potential, 60 overall is what will go with it. He's only 19 years old, so even though they may not know everything about him right now, they like what they've seen / heard about him for the time being. He's got very good velocity and really doesn't have that much to work on. You know, could try to get him to be a better fielder, but he does have a great reaction time, so the defensive potential is there. He's got solid potential as a pitcher, and so Dave Klaus will be selected by the Seattle Pilots with the 22nd overall pick. And now we start getting to the teams that did make it to the playoffs. You know, first team that was a guarantee selection. We had the New Orleans Kings with the 23rd overall pick, but they also, kind of took some L's in free agency this past offseason, and they could use quite a few things. They could use some first base help, really could use help all along their infield. They also could use help in left field as well as in that starting pitching department as well. But that being said, a team that did also do its homework. Look at Fred Baker, shortstop, only 19 years old, from Iowa, Field of Dreams guy, and not to mention, well, I guess he is a hitter that hits mostly in right field. I thought he was a right-handed hitter. Turns out he throws right, but bats with his left. So that's kind of interesting to see. And really nice all-around guy. Doesn't have anything elite right now, but does have a pretty good arm. Not an elite arm, but it is a pretty good arm out there. So you can gun some people down. That's for sure. Not going to be that quick out there at shortstop as well. I don't know why I thought he was an outfielder for whatever reason. I'm stupid, but it would be stupid as well if Fred Baker was not selected by the New Orleans Kings, and he has a 2023 ETA, so he could be ready as soon as next season. Watch out for Fred Baker. Up next is the Minnesota Ducks, who do currently possess the 24th overall selection. Now, Minnesota doesn't need much. They just need either a second baseman, or they can get themselves a left fielder as well if they choose to. But looking at their scouting board right now, they really, they're not going to address it here in this first round. They might wait a little bit later to address that. A player that they do really like, though, is third baseman Ricky Schaefer. Now, Ricky Schaefer, he has a relatively high potential as of right now. They do have Thad Gonzalez, but who's going to be behind him? Maybe Andrew Barthold is somebody that can really emerge, but only 19 years old, 75 potential. That's very elite potential. Above average overall as well, 55 overall to go with it as well. Needs to work on his vision and discipline at the plate, but got very good reaction skills and very good speed as well. Not elite, and maybe he could become a pretty good stealer as well. Scouted at a 70. Right now, he's a 35. If he can work on that at the minor league level, he can turn into a very good player for the Minnesota Ducks. So the San Francisco Seals are picking at the 25th overall selection. They are a team. They really need one thing and one thing only. They just need a left fielder. They're lacking left field depth. They only have 2 left fielders between the USBL roster and as well as the minor league roster. So it'd just be good business to get yourself a left fielder. Johnny Miller, he's listed as an 80 potential guy, 60 overall to go with it as well. Cannot hit very far, doesn't have very good power hitting necessarily, but that being said, he's a good contact hitter to go with it. Solid vision, solid discipline. Does need to work on his fielding. He's not a very good fielder, but does make up with that with good speed and has the ability to steal. Could become an elite base stealer. They like what they see on tape, and so the San Francisco Seals, in order to address the need for a third outfielder or left fielder in their left field, they're going to grab Johnny Miller with the 25th pick. And that brings us to the Houston Hurricanes. Now, Houston has definitely struggled over the course of this season, but because of how well they did, make it to the ALCS, all that good stuff, they really only need a right fielder. But the problem is, though, right field, they don't have really too many guys scouted in the right field department, so they might wait a round or two to go ahead and try and maybe address that. One player that they could go towards is Steve Ortega. Catcher is not necessarily a strength. It could go ahead and, be a future player once in the event that MJ Malen says. He could even be a nice trade piece too, depending on what happens here. But 80 potential, you cannot afford to miss out on 80 potential. He's not a good hitter by any stretch of the imagination, but he has a good arm. That could be a foundation to be a good defensive player in the future. So Steve Ortega will be drafted by the Houston Hurricanes. For pick number 27, that does belong to the Los Angeles Saints. And LA, they actually have a few needs, despite the fact that they had one of the best records, a defending division champ. They could use some help at second base, right field, or even in left field as of right now. But look who they're staring at him right now, Tim Mears. He's a guy that, is pretty solid, 70 potential, 55 overall, a little bit older, 23 years old, so doesn't have a ton of time to really fulfill his potential necessarily, but, seems like a player that could be pretty good down the line. Has very good speed, decent stealing ability, an average hitter, really, so definitely a fast guy out there in right field. Is going to cover a lot of ground. We'll see if the rest of his skills can catch up for the LA Saints. The Cleveland Rockers, on the other hand, though, they have been a little down bad this season, but they are selected with the 28th overall pick, and Cleveland could use, particularly left field. They are a little bit light out there in left field right now, but they don't really have a lot of left fielders scouted as of right now. However, that being said, they could get themselves a center fielder or even get themselves a third baseman should they choose to. But that being said, they are looking at Bernardo Corona, 75 potential, 60 overall guy, and the potential is really good. He is a pretty solid player. Needs to work on his power a little bit, needs to be a little bit more disciplined at the plate, but does carry elite speed and could become an elite stealer of bases in the future. The 19-year-old native from Venezuela will be selected by the Cleveland Rockers with the 28th overall pick. Now, it may not seem like it, but the Philadelphia Patriots actually had the second best record in the USBL, although it didn't really matter when they got swept out by the good old-fashioned San Francisco Seals on their way to the World Series. But that being said, they really only need a first baseman as well as a third baseman right now, and they're also really light at that first base position right now. They only have 2 first basemen. Both of them are getting a lot older, Jesus Aguilar, Seth Brown, so they might need to address first baseman in the future because Tim Orias is not necessarily going to be ready, but it does fill a need for them, and it does replenish the farm system a little bit. So Tim Orias is going to go ahead and be selected by the Philadelphia Patriots with the 29th overall pick. And now for the final selection in the first round of the USBL draft that belongs to the defending World Series champions, the Chicago Freeze. But Chicago has a ton of strengths. We know how good this roster is, but that being said, left field and third base, could use just a little bit of help. Their most scouted player is a bullpen person, but they don't need bullpen help, though. That's the crazy thing. So, John Oda, I know they were looking at him quite a bit, but they're actually going to go ahead and, look in a different direction between that third base and what they have in center field. Although third base, they don't really have scouted as well. Left field, though, left field's a little different story. Mitchell Martin is here, 60 overall, 60 potential. So not a guy that seems like he could grow very much, but he is an above average player, though. That being said, just needs to work on his power a little bit, and does have an elite fielding, does have elite reaction time as well, and has very good vision. Kind of Joey Votto-esque, except as an outfielder and maybe a tad quicker. So Mitchell Martin will be a solid add, especially because there's not a lot of depth out there. Michael Brantley is, he's going to be regressing quickly. So that's going to wrap up the first round. And now for the rest of the draft, I'm going to show you the highlights for various teams in the rest of the draft in terms of how they fill out needs and whatnot. So we go ahead and get started in competitive balance A, where we go to the Aurora Lightning. Now, the Lightning, they need 2 center fielders, and they're going to go ahead and get one of them right here, right now. Pablo Ortiz, going to be the 31st overall pick in the first selection in the competitive balance round A. As for the Baltimore Stone Crabs here in competitive balance round A, they are going to go ahead and address their bullpen a little bit. They're going to grab themselves Garrett Cooper, who has a 2024 ETA, 80 potential, 65 overall, to help strengthen the bullpen. Now, for the Nashville Blues, they are in need of a third baseman, and they like Brent Kirtland, although he doesn't have that much potential, though. He is a decent player, could be a nice piece down the line, but he has a 2026 ETA, so Brent Kirtland will go to the Nashville Blues. As for the Phoenix Firebirds, with their first pick in the competitive balance round A, they are going to address the starting pitching position with Alberto Montanero. The 20-year-old from Mississippi has elite potential and is an above average player right now. He could be a great pickup for the Phoenix Firebirds. One of the needs that the Denver Bald Eagles have at first base is Scott Roy, at his first base, and they're going to address it with Scott Roy. 80 potential, 50 overall, does have a 26 availability in terms of a being a guy that's USBL ready, but can be a very good pick. A major need that the Columbus Jets have as well is in the right field position. They do have Harold Rodriguez as well as Julio Rodriguez and Salvador Ojeda in the farm system, but to try to address that a little bit further, they're going to go with William Ka, the 22-year-old from South Korea, 75 potential and 50 overall. Meanwhile, in the competitive round A portion of the USBL draft, the Memphis Bobcats are in need of some help with their starting pitching rotation, and they're going to find some in 20-year-old Dominique Gonzalez, who will be joining the Memphis Bobcat. Now, the San Diego Whales were fortunate in getting themselves a top prospect, a blue chipper, as they had a guy fall right to them with the 13th overall pick, and they might have a pretty solid player here too. Tommy Bastard, the San Diego Whales do have a need to fill up some things in the farm system, has elite potential, 55 overall, so just about average to that above average range. He'll be selected by the San Diego Whales. So we know that the Las Vegas Lounge Wizards here in competitive round A could use some help at shortstop. I mean, they got Merwin Gonzalez, but he's 33 years old. Wander Franco is not necessarily ready to take over for that spot, and they don't have a ton of great depth at the shortstop position. So they're going to pick up Samuel Vaquero, the 22-year-old from Iowa, here in competitive balance round A. For the Jacksonville Suns here in competitive balance round A, they will go with Kevin Vargas, who's scouted pretty thoroughly, has elite potential, and also 60 overall to go with it. The 22-year-old Cuban is going to make his way up to Jacksonville. But even though they already did go ahead and pick themselves a player in the competitive balance round A portion, they have a second pick in this round, and they're going to go with Steven Delgado, 75 overall, 70 potential, 22 years old from the Dominican Republic, going to play with the Phoenix Firebirds. Meanwhile, the San Diego Whales, they also get at least a second competitive balance round A pick in this draft because of their losses in free agency. They're going to go with Johnny Roof, 70 overall, 75 potential, and a 2023 ETA as well. He could be playing with the USBL squad very quickly at the USBL level. The Memphis Bobcats, in the meantime, with their second competitive round A pick, are going to go ahead and go with Leo Dottie. The 21-year-old from North Carolina has both above average overall and above average potential to go with it. The Aurora Lightning will also go ahead. They will make sure that they go ahead and address their other need. They only have one center fielder, by the way, so this is why they're doing this. They're picking up a second center fielder in this round. Michael Doe, the 21-year-old prospect from South Korea, is joining the Aurora Lightning. The Charlotte Cougars, meanwhile, do get their first competitive balance pick in this draft, and they are going to use it on Eric Fletcher, the 20-year-old from California. 60 overall, but great potential, though. 75 potential, according to the Charlotte Cougars scouting department. Up next is the Honolulu Islanders in terms of notable picks. They had a need at second base, and they're going to use it on Abe Dutzman. 70 potential, 55 overall. The 20-year-old from New York is going to go all the way across the country to go play, at least start his USBL career on the Hawaiian Islands. Meanwhile, in competitive balance round A, the Baltimore Stone Crabs are going to make a move to try to address the catcher position a little bit, to try to get some more guys there. They're a little thin out there at that position right now. How about another prospect, Freddie Skaggs, 75 overall, 75 potential. The California kid is going to also move across the country, except going east to start his USBL career with the Baltimore Stone Crabs. Meanwhile, in a quest for the Seattle Pilots to go ahead and retool their baseball team a little bit, they are going to go get Bruce Phipps, 80 potential, 65 overall, has a 2024 ETA as well. The 20-year-old prospect from Alabama is going to join the Seattle Pilots organization. With the very next pick, though, and what could be a home run pick in the eyes of the New Orleans Kings, they're going to grab Michael Tadino, 80 potential, 55 overall, the 20-year-old from Japan. He's going to America to join the New Orleans Kings organization. Keeping it in the competitive balance round A portion of the draft, the Minnesota Ducks are on deck, and they're going to grab Lewis Springer, a 75 potential guy, 55 overall. The 19-year-old from Pennsylvania is joining the Minnesota Ducks organization. And now we go ahead and jump into the second round, where the Nashville Blues, they will start things off at the top of the second round. Pick up Sergio Guzman, a left fielder, 75 potential, 55 overall. The 21-year-old from Venezuela is joining the Nashville Blues organization. Meanwhile, with the pick right after, the Denver Ball Eagles, with the second pick in the second round of the USBL draft, they're going to pick up Larry Hendricks, elite potential, got some really good stuff, and is only 19 years old. The Missouri player going out west and joined the Denver Bald Eagles organization. Now, the Milwaukee Bears did not have a competitive balance round A pick because, they were pretty active in free agency, but they're going to try to address this shortstop position a little bit. They got two really good players, Logan Davidson and Lonnie Mascirio, in terms of future guys, but they could use somebody to at least get the good old-fashioned farm system going a little bit more. So we're going to grab Rick Gelman at shortstop, the 23-year-old from Michigan, staying in the Midwest, and join the Milwaukee Bears. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Barons, in their attempt to go ahead and try to retool their roster, are going to grab themselves Louis Gonzalez. Not going to be ready for the USBL action right away, 2026 plus ETA, but does have 80 potential, and you can't ignore that. The San Antonio Outlaws, with their very next with literally the very next pick, they are also going to address a need as well. They're going to grab themselves Luke McCarty, not as flashy as the last prospect that we saw highlighted, but 23 years old from California. It's going to bring some maturity to the farm system, at least initially, and does have a solid shot of making it to the USBL level. The Louisville Colonials, in addition, will be going ahead and addressing a need at a major position as well. They're going to go ahead, grab themselves Roger Anderson, 80 potential, 55 overall, the 22-year-old from Pennsylvania. Gonna kind of stay in the neighborhood, going down to Kentucky to play for the Louisville Colonials organization. Meanwhile, the Boston Quakers finally get themselves back around. They did not have a competitive balance round A pick, but they do have a second round pick, and they're going to use it to address a little bit of a need for them. They're going to go ahead and grab themselves Jackie Potts, and he could start for them next season because this pitching rotation does not have a top flight guy. At least not yet. So the Las Vegas Lounge Wizards only have 3 players right now in their third base position right now, between Josh Jung, Quincy Wiles, and Jose Miranda. And they don't really have any top flight prospects. Hopefully Josh Jung can develop to something nice for him. But how about Kevin McCann? He could be somebody that could start right away potentially. 70 overall, 65 potential. He's going to go ahead and be drafted by the Las Vegas Lounge Wizards. Not to be outdone, the Jacksonville Suns are also going to go ahead and get somebody that could potentially be the heir apparent to Wilson Ramos for the Jacksonville Suns catcher position. They're going to grab David DeCarmen, 70 potential, 60 overall, the 23-year-old from Canada. He's going to be going to much warmer weather, playing for the Jacksonville organization. The Phoenix Firebirds will also go ahead and make sure they take care of one of their positions of needs, they're going to go ahead and grab William Seo, another South Korean player that's going to be highlighted in this USBL draft special. 2026 plus ETA, but 65 potential. That's at least above average and is only 19 years old as well. He's going to play across the world playing for Phoenix. The San Diego Whales are also going to go ahead and take care of one of their positions of needs as well and grab themselves Robbie Tidwell with a 2024 ETA of a 19-year-old from Illinois, also going to experience some much nicer weather playing in the San Diego organization. Not to be outdone, the Memphis Bobcats are going to grab their second arm in this draft. They're going to grab Rodney Reeves with their second round pick, the 21-year-old from Louisiana. Gonna go slightly up north to play in Tennessee. The Charlotte Cougars will also make sure to take care of a position of need as well as they go grab Jonas Corona, second baseman, 75 overall, 70 potential. So a little bit wonky there to say the least, but 22 years old, he is from Indiana, and he will be selected by the Charlotte Cougars. But what if I told you the New York Knights grabbed themselves a potential stud muffin in the second round? Chris Fizzler, closing pitcher. He has 80 potential, 70 overall. He is a little bit older, 23 years old from Arizona, but this kid looks like he has what it takes to be special. Could play in season 3 if called upon. He's going to go to the New York Knights. The Washington Senators here in the second round are also going to try to shore up that shortstop position. They got a couple of promising prospects such as Bryson Stott, Jeremy Pena, Luis Garcia, but it never hurts to have depth or have someone that could step in right away and play for your organization. Chip McNacme, wow, that's a really weird last name, but the 19-year-old from Colorado who has a really weird last name, he's going to be joining the Washington Senators. Seattle is also desperate to try to get some young talent in here, and they're going to go after Cecile Costa to try to fill the void. 70 potential, 60 overall, really nice for a second round pick. The 6'4" product out of Ohio, gonna go across the country and play for the Seattle Pilots organization. Meanwhile, at third base, they certainly like what they see in terms of a future starting third baseman in Juan Almenza. He's about average as a player right now, but has certainly some very good potential at that third base position. Actually, can become a really nice second baseman as well to go with it. So going to go and select Julian Almenza towards the end of his second round for the New Orleans Kings. As we go ahead and progress through the third round, the Milwaukee Bears, they are certainly in some need, to improve their bullpen a little bit, and I think they like what they see in Anthony Silva, 60 overall, 80 potential, and has a 2025 ETA as well, so might not need that much seasoning. The 22-year-old from Puerto Rico is going to go ahead and join the Milwaukee Bears. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Barons are going to continue to try and address some needs as they'll go and grab Warner Floyd. He only has 60 potential, which might only have the potential to be an above average player, but 55 overall though, at least he wouldn't have that much growing to do. Maybe he won't need that much time in the minor leagues, or he's a guy that would stay forever in the farm system. Meanwhile, the San Antonio Outlaws were here in round 3, and they still only have 2 players on their roster that can play first base. That's Nate Lowe and Jeremy Vasquez. They need a third person, at least for the farm system. They're going to grab themselves Carlos Pinto, 45 overall, 70 potential. Doesn't look very great necessarily, but it does at least fill a need for them at that first base position. Meanwhile, the pick after that for the Louisville Colonials could be somebody that could be seen as a potential home run pick, or at least a guy that could contribute right away. Edgar Chavez, 2023 ETA, 65 overall, 65 potential. And that's good to know, considering they don't really have anyone solid in their farm system, and Charlie Backman is declining at a relatively quick pace. So Edgar Chavez could be the new right fielder for the Louisville Colonials in Season 3. The Boston Quakers are also going to go ahead and make sure they get somebody at a position of need. They're going to grab Enrique Rocha, 50 overall, 65 potential. And this is a hometown pick. He was born and raised in Massachusetts, And he's going to be able to play for his hometown team, the Boston Quakers. Welcome to the squad. The 3rd round pick going with Boston. Continuing the trend of center fielders, we got the Pittsburgh Force. They could also use a little bit of center field help. They got Nick Senzel, who's a very good looking prospect, but they could use some more depth there as well. So we're going to grab Bobby Kozer, 55 overall, 70 potential, so could become a very good player. And they're going to use that as an opportunity to go ahead and draft him at that position. Jumping down to midway through the 3rd round, they find themselves looking at Ben Ophelia, who does have 70 potential as well as 55 overall. Plus, he's only 18 years old. This is nice for a 3rd round pick. The Charlotte Cougars in this 3rd round spot are going to go ahead and select Ben Ophelia. With the very next pick, Volvo, New York Knights are going to address a major need as their left field depth is simply not very good right now. They are going to go ahead, grab Otto Weston, 50 overall, but 80 potential. He's going to be an 8 potential guy when it's all said and done. The 23-year-old from Utah is going to join the New York Knights organization. The Honolulu Islanders are also going to make sure they take care of one of their last needs that they have in this draft. In the 3rd round, they're going to grab Brian Jimenez, 60 overall, 70 potential. The 23-year-old going to be hopping from one island in Puerto Rico to the Honolulu Islanders, going to Hawaii. Meanwhile, in the bottom 3rd of the 3rd round of USBL draft, the Seattle Pilots, they're back at it again with the White Vans, of course, and they are going to find themselves a catcher in this round. They're going to go after Henry Perquette, 55 overall, 70 potential. The 21-year-old from Texas is coming with the Seattle Pilots. The New Orleans Kings will also try to get their starting rotation back on track, find a future starter, as 4 of their 5 starting pitchers in the USBL level, they are 30 years or older. Hopefully Donovan Zorino can develop in time. The 23-year-old from Mexico will be selected in the 3rd round of the USBL draft. As we get ready to go ahead and get closer to wrapping up the 3rd round, they are going to address this 3rd baseman position here a little bit. They got Luis Torbillo in the wings, but is that going to be enough? You always like to have multiple good prospects there. Esteban Abreu fits that bill. 60 potential, 60 overall. The 21-year-old from Jersey is going to Cleveland, the player of the Cleveland Rockers organization. The Philadelphia Patriots realizing there's really only one player left that is, caliber for professional baseball. Keenan Edmondson, the last 3rd baseman taken. He has a 50 overall, 60 potential. 21 years old from Florida. He's going to be joining this Philadelphia Patriots organization. Welcome to the squad. But now we go ahead and jump into the nitty gritty. We are now in competitive balance round B. And the Milwaukee Bears, they still need a catcher. Or at least fill up that catcher position, because they really don't have any good catchers behind James McCann and Manny Pena, who are really USBL caliber. So we're going to take a shot at Bruno Dalabo, 60 overall, 65 potential. The 22-year-old from the Dominican Republic will go ahead and join the Milwaukee Beer organization. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Barons in this competitive balance round B, they are also going to try and go ahead and get the 1st base position secured. At least get another 1st baseman in there. Luis Rosado fits that bill. 55 overall, but 50 potential though. So doesn't seem like he has much room for growth, if any. But that being said, the Atlanta Barons will go ahead and take him here in this competitive balance round B. Meanwhile, the Seattle Pilots still here late in competitive balance round B. They are going to go and grab themselves some Cecil Vagan, who is not one of those players that has a higher overall than potential. That's something I will try to change if I do end up catching it. But for now, the 19-year-old from the state of Michigan is going to go ahead and join the Seattle Pilots organization. But with the amount of second basemen that are even USBL caliber running extremely low, the New Orleans Kings are going to also pick up a second baseman. They will grab the other one that was considered USBL caliber in Jason Cortez, 55 overall, 60 potential. The 22-year-old from Nebraska is going to go ahead and join the New Orleans Kings organization. So now that we did go ahead and make it through all of the highlights, let's go ahead and take a look at each team's draft class. And why not start with the team that had the #1 overall pick, the Nashville Blues. And no surprises here. They got a star with their #1 pick. They got Guadalupe Sierra, the 19-year-old from Puerto Rico. And, you know, he has some great potential. 94 potential, 61 overall, though. So he will need a little bit of time, need a little bit of seasoning. But that being said, he could be a very good player for the Nashville Blues. A borderline superstar, a franchise player. But the rest of his draft class does leave a little bit more to be desired. They do could Mariano Tahiro could be something kind of special. His potential is going to be bumped up a little bit because players shouldn't have an overall that's higher than their potential. That just really doesn't make sense. If you're in the minor leagues, you should at least get a tad better, even though maybe there isn't as much growth. But yeah, the rest of this draft class for the Nashville Blues does leave a little bit more to be desired at the end of the day. For the Minnesota Ducks, though, they got a couple of really nice players in this draft. First and foremost, they did end up picking up Ricky Schaefer late in the first round, 24th overall selection. Should be a borderline all-star caliber player if he does reach his full potential. 81 potential, only a 56 overall, though, so it does need a little bit of seasoning, a little bit of help there. But they also got some nice players that could also potentially contribute right away. They got Abraham Muriel, 70 overall from the jump, left fielder, 22-year-old from California. He's going to get a bump in potential for the same reason I gave for one of the Nashville Blues players. And then they also managed to pick up James Johnson in the competitive balance round B portion of the USBL draft. He was a 24th pick in that round, and he has really good potential, 85 potential. This is a really good haul for the Minnesota Ducks, even though that 60 overall has some work to do. But he is a very good pickup for Minnesota, and nice job drafting late in this draft. The Houston Hurricanes also picked themselves at least 2 borderline all-stars in this draft potentially. First pick they had, it was the 26 overall pick. They got Steve Ortega, like I said, 87 potential, 52 overall. So his overall was not as high as anticipated, but his potential was higher than he was originally listed. So a little bit of a project player, but can be a very good player for the Houston Hurricanes. They also got Juan Tejo, who doesn't have a very high potential, even probably gonna only get like 70 potential when we bump him up, but 68 overall, that's a good start to work with. That's borderline usable for USBL action right from the jump. He just doesn't really have that much growth in him. Then they also picked up Johnny Sanchez, starting pitcher for the Houston Hurricanes. He also coming in with 87 potential to go with it. The 22-year-old from Puerto Rico, competitive rounds B pick, gonna be a 59 overall to start things out. Has great velocity on his stuff. Moving on, now we got the Honolulu Islanders, and Honolulu, at least starting off, did not have a good start to this draft whatsoever. Their first 4 picks were simply not very good, to say the least. But let me tell you about the second half of this draft. Steve Burnett, closing pitcher, competitive round B pick. Dude is a stud. I can't believe he fell down this far. There was not a lot of teams that necessarily needed bullpen help, but this guy, 68 overall, 94 potential to go with it. The Canadian, proven that he could be one of the best players to ever come out of the country of Canada. He could very well become a future superstar for Honolulu, and the fact they got him this late too is a huge plus. That being said, though, the rest of his draft class, I mean, they got a few USBL caliber players down the line, but really no other stars in this draft. Meanwhile, the Las Vegas Lounge Wizards, though, they might have picked up somebody that might have the highest potential of this draft. Blue chip prospect Elliot Parker, 70 or 63 overall, but a 97 potential to go with it, though. So this is going to be a very good pick for Las Vegas, especially if he can live up to that potential. He could potentially be the face of the USBL down the line. The rest of his draft, though, is not that great. Kevin McCann can be a day one player for the Las Vegas baseball team. His potential is going to get bumped up a little bit, so not a bad pick by Las Vegas by any means of the imagination. Clarence Chenot could also be there too. He's already a 69. Nice third round pick coming out of Kansas, although he is 23 years old, so doesn't have a ton of potential, but could be a usable player. And then the rest of their draft is, well, leaves a little bit more to be desired, but they got a few really good picks here, in these first 4 rounds that they participated in. Now, the Seattle Pilots, they really need to retool their roster, and, they were busy on draft night picking up a bunch of players that were need-based. They got one all-star caliber player, I think, down the line in Bruce Phipps. They picked him up in the competitive round A portion of the USBL draft, 61 overall, 89 potential to go with it as well. They also picked up another borderline all-star for the bullpen, Dave Klaus, though he will have a little bit of seasoning that will need to be done before he is truly ready to go. And then they did also manage to go ahead and pick up Sean Hippern all the way in the 4th round of the USBL draft. This was a guy that, again, doesn't have a ton of potential whatsoever, but 73 overall. He could start in the starting rotation right away for Seattle, and that's really crucial because their team is starting to get a little older. As for the San Antonio Outlaws, even though that they did end up having themselves the 6th overall selection in the USBL draft, they only picked up 5 players from this draft class, although pretty solid pickups. I would say at least 2 of them are. Aubrey Ulysses, that's their 6th overall pick, blue chip prospect, definitely lives up from a potential standpoint, 93 potential. He is a 62 overall though, so his overall not necessarily as high as it was originally anticipated, but that being said, can be a star player and ace for the San Antonio Outlaws down the line. And then they also picked up somebody that could grow into an all-star over in the 3rd round. They got Carlos Pinto at first base. He has 80 potential, but has a ton of seasoning to do. He is a 49 overall, so definitely has a ton of work that needs to be done, but he's only 20 years old. The Australian, he has some good stuff to work with. He's got decent speed. He's got a very good ability to steal bases, and he has a decent ability to steal. He just needs to work on the rest of his game and then try to get himself healthy. Up next is the Charlotte Cougars draft class, and with their first selection, they picked up William Mura with the 16th overall pick, and a nice pickup for Charlotte. 82 potential guy. He is a 53 overall to go with it as well. So this is a guy that could potentially become an all-star if he can live up to that potential and those expectations. But other than that, no really any other all-star caliber players. Jonas Corona, he is a second baseman. He was picked up actually in the 2nd round. In the 2nd round of the USBL draft. He could use a little bit of bump. He will be up to a 75 potential, but 72 overall. He could potentially start at second base, but the thing with him is he's not very versatile. He doesn't really have a usable secondary position, and yeah, that's really the only notable players in this Charlotte draft class. Meanwhile, Jacksonville was extremely busy on draft night, and they picked up probably the best pitcher from a potential standpoint. They picked up Walter Chen with the 11th overall pick. Now, to Jacksonville's Suns. Now, this guy is only a 55 overall, so he has a lot of room before he grows into that star player that he is projected to be. He does not have the greatest ability in terms of striking people out or in terms of having control over his velocity, but he's got good velocity and he has great breaking ball stuff already. So watch out for that in the future. He could become a star one of these days. And then they did also manage to pick up Dennis Dozier for the bullpen. He was a competitive bounce round B pick for the Jacksonville Suns, 85 potential, and he's already 65 overall, so he's got some stuff to work with. It might not be very long until Dennis Dozier does find his way onto the main USBL squad. He might not be in the minors for a long period of time. And then to round up this Jacksonville Suns draft class, they got a nice pickup for the 5th round. They got Omar Rizaldo. I know he only has 72 potential. It's not very good, but he's already a 71 overall, though. The 19-year-old from Texas, he can stand in and start for the USBL team over in the bullpen right away. And that'll be very good, especially for somebody that's a 5th round pick. He doesn't really have any chance to be anything better than maybe a borderline everyday USBL player. Maybe someone that goes back and forth between the minors and the majors. But that being said, good pickup for a 5th round pick. The New Orleans Kings, while they picked late in this draft, they were a team that lost some talent in free agency, and this was a really important draft class for them, and they really did a good job hitting with their first 2 picks, even though they didn't get any blue chip guys. Their first selection was Fred Baker. He was the 23rd overall pick, 68 overall, so a very good player to work with for sure. His durability might be a little bit of a question mark, but his stats look really nice for a rookie. And he has 90 potential to go with it as well, so he can definitely turn into a star. Could play at the USBL right away. Maybe only spends a year and a half tops at the minors. Then they also picked up Michael Tadano in the competitive round A portion of the draft. He's an 84 potential as well. So their first 2 picks turned out pretty well. You couldn't really ask for much better. Definitely some home run picks for them there, especially because Michael Tadano, while he does have some seasoning that does need to be done, he is also somebody that can go out there and be a guy that can be an all-star caliber player if he can reach his potential. For the Philadelphia Patriots, the Philadelphia Patriots did end up with 6 signees for their draft class, and really is not that good of a draft class whatsoever. They were bailed out a little bit by their 5th selection that they had in the competitive round B portion of the draft. TJ Bunty, it's their best pick, which is really sad, especially when your first round selection only has 63 potential and is a 47 overall. That is a complete whiff. He has bust written all over his sorry face, so you really hate to see that. But that being said, though, TJ Bunty, 88 potential. He's going to be really good down the line. He'll be a great add to the starting rotation for the Philadelphia Patriots. Does need to work on a few things. Needs to work on his ability to strike out batters, his plate control, that, things like that. But he could be a very good player down the line for Philadelphia, even make an all-star game someday. Keeping it in the NL East, we have the Washington Senators now, and Washington was a team that really didn't do that great of a job drafting for a potential standpoint, but that being said, they did pick up a couple of guys that could very well be USBL ready here pretty soon in year number 3. For example, the Washington Senators picked up Chip McNamee, I think. Let me know down in the comments how I pronounce his last name, man. Does that, for some reason, it doesn't even look that hard, but whenever I try to say it, it's just a struggle bus. But 71 overall, 75 potential. He can play right away. And then they also picked up Javen DeVore as well as a closer. He could also step in. Maybe not be the main closer for the Washington Senators necessarily, but he can go into the bullpen and be at least a guy that, can be an extra bullpen arm for the Washington Senators. He is USBL ready. And then Richard Bronson, their last selection that they had, it was late in the 4th round. They got Richard Bronson, who only 58 overall right now, has some work that needs to be done. But that being said, though, this is a guy that can be very good down the line. All-star caliber, I would say. 87 potential. The fact that they got that in a 4th round, that is a huge win for them. Speaking of huge dumps, the Indianapolis Indians did a pretty nice job drafting. A lot of the guys that they drafted could be USBL caliber down the line. Dave Cannon is a little bit of a disappointment. Only 76 potential. You liked it to be a little bit higher with somebody that is going to go ahead and be your first selection. But they did make up with Vladimir Rosa. 59 overall, so he does have some seasoning that needs to happen. Not very good in the field. Needs to work on his defense specifically, but That being said, 90 potential, very good for a competitive balance round A pick. You love to see that. And then to top it off, they did also pick up Jacob Soroyan in the competitive round B portion of the USBL draft. He is an 87 potential guy. So 2 very good arms that are going to be added between Jacob Soroyan and Vladimir Rosa. You'll like to see that. Indianapolis, you know, the bullpen and their starting rotation wasn't a strength for them necessarily, but it could very well be a strength for them down the line if these 2 players can go ahead and develop. Now, the Louisville Colonials, they are slipping a little bit. They are here with the 7th overall selection in this draft, and they got some dudes for sure. First 2 guys they certainly hit if they can develop. Jason Kaminsky does have some work to do in the development department, but a 91 potential though, and they love his velocity. Dude has a 99-mile-per-hour fastball already going into the USBL. Plus, he got a 91-mile-per-hour slider to go with it. Got that 12-6 curve, the changeup. What really holds him back is his ability to control his pitches, and just has a hard time finishing at bats in terms of making sure they actually strike out. So definitely need some seasoning in the minor leagues, but can be a star closer, one of the best closers in the USBL potentially. And then Roger Anderson, third baseman for the Colonials. Now, he was a 2nd round pick, 82 potential to go with it. He's a 53 overall as well, so also would need some work. But these first 2 guys, gotta be very excited if you're a Louisville fan. But that wasn't the only person of note. They have somebody that may not have the highest potential, but that being said though, they got somebody that is USBL ready today. Edgar Chavez, right fielder, could be somebody that could be starting in right field for Louisville in season number 3. They do have Charlie Blackmon. He is declining real quick, and they don't really have anybody ready. He doesn't have the greatest potential in the world necessarily, so that will hold him back from being a star player in this league. But that being said though, he can step in and play for Louisville right away. He's gonna have some big shoes to fill. The Milwaukee Bears are on deck, and they had the 4th overall selection. They did a good job hitting with their first pick. They got Daniel Ciara, 94 potential guy, and got some decent stats to work with as well. Starting off at a 63 overall, you like to see that. You would like to see the stamina get a little bit higher, but he does have good breaking stuff. Does need to also see if he can work on his velocity. So definitely someone, if he can't have good velocity on his stuff, he will need to work on his breaking stuff, needs to work on his control. But despite that, you know, he has the ability to control his stuff relatively well already. If it can, you know, build off of that, he can be a star pitcher despite not having elite velocity on his pitches. Another person I want to highlight in this draft class is also a starting pitcher. He probably will not grow as much as Daniel Ciara, but he's considered a little bit more ready already despite being a 4th round pick. Jack Rico, he's going to come in as a 67 overall. He could be somebody that could also potentially play at the USBL next season. On deck is the Aurora Lightning, and Aurora is an interesting team. They had the number 1 pick last season, and they definitely hit with George Alberto Hernandez. He could be playing as soon as this season. But taking a look at the year 2 draft class, they got some good players. They need some time developing. Pablo Francisco is a perfect example of that. He's only a 43 overall, so he's got a ton of work to do, but his potential is pretty high. He is an 88 potential. It is lower than what was originally projected, but he still, you know, has a lot of room to grow. The problem is though, how much time does he have? He's 23 years old, from Mexico. So this could go in a lot of different ways. Either he is a guy that becomes an all-star player, or he never really touches the USBL in a full-time capacity. Meanwhile, they did also end up picking up Barry Gillian here in the 2nd round. They had 2 round A picks, and they used it to get that center field position under control. They got Barry Gillian, starting pitcher, 82 potential guy. He could also become an all-star down the line. Not to mention they got 10 Palacios, 74 overall. He is a 74 potential, so what you see is literally what you're going to get with this guy. But the 22-year-old from Cuba, could very well step in and play right away for the Aurora Lightning. Could even be used as trade bait potentially for somebody that needs a second baseman. You know what I'm saying? So definitely something to look at there. Memphis, on the other hand, really struggled with their draft this year. They had the 14th overall selection, so they didn't get a chance to pick up a blue chip prospect, but this draft class is straight up not good. It might be the worst draft class I have seen. Yeah, this is straight up terrible. Their first 5 picks probably will not touch the USBL level in a full-time capacity. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. This is not a good draft by Memphis. They are saved a little bit towards the end. They did pick up Fernando Valguez, who was selected all the way into competitive round B portion of the draft. 73 overall, 80 potential, so he could be playing at the USBL level right away. And Ricky Waller could also be there too, but these really are the only 2 players that could see the USBL level for the Memphis Bobcats. Now, the Phoenix Firebirds had the 12th selection. They had an opportunity to go ahead and grab themselves a blue chip prospect, but Phoenix was a team that was strong at right field. That was the only blue chip prospect that was left, so they actually decided to go ahead and go into a different direction. They ended up going with Doug Vinetz and I'll show you what the 13th overall selection was for the San Diego Whales shortly, but man, this could feel like a little bit of a miss. I mean, he could reach the USBL level if he reaches his potential, but it does feel like he might not meet the expectations of a 12th overall selection. They do make up for it though. They do manage to find themselves Alberto Maldonado, and he has really good potential. Borderline star, has 64 overall, so might not need that much time at the USBL minor leagues per se. Maybe a season 4 destination for this guy if he works on his craft. He works hard at what he needs to do. We do also got themselves Steven Delgadio, who will get a bump in his potential, like I said, and a 72 overall with it. Probably won't have the highest potential in the world, but that being said though, he will be a decent rotational player for the Phoenix Firebirds, so not a bad selection there for Phoenix, also in competitive round A. And that takes us to the Denver Bald Eagles. Now, Denver is still in the midst of a rebuild, and they got 3 borderline stars in terms of potential, so probably one of the best drafts that we have seen. Of course, no surprises there. They got George Varaz, 23-year-old, 93 potential, so won't have a ton of time to grow, but 63 overall, you already got some decent stuff to work with. I like the draft that this team had. Might be the best draft in this league for year 2. Scott Roy, he'll have a lot of work to do, but he's an 87 potential. The upside with this kid is off the rails. And then they also managed to get Larry Hendricks, also borderline star guy potentially. They got him in the 2nd round, 63 overall, 89 potential. He could see the USBL level relatively quickly as well. The LA Saints, meanwhile, rode that struggle bus a little bit. Their first pick in this draft, the 27th overall pick, is only going to be a guy with 67 potential, so he probably won't see the USBL, so that's a really tough look for a first pick. And matter of fact, really the only player that the LA Saints really have of note in this draft class is Cedric McClain. He does have 80 potential. He's a 71 overall too, so he has an incredibly high overall to work with. He doesn't have a elite velocity, but he does a pretty good job of making sure hits aren't allowed. Won't have a ton of room to grow, but can be a USBL player day 1 if the LA Saints need him to be. So that leads us to the San Diego Whales. This was the player that Phoenix ended up passing on, and it was Dominic James. It was just a nice swoop-in opportunity for San Diego. They were not originally slated to get a blue chip prospect, but they will end up getting themselves one here. 91 potential, so they definitely knew what they were doing instead of what Phoenix was doing. Granted, I understand because right field was a strength for Phoenix. Dominic James, though, tons of work that needs to be done. Only a 50 overall. This is not going to be a very good baseball player from the jump, but he did just start playing baseball recently, He does have that A potential. He can grow into a USBL caliber player. And same thing could be said for Tommy Bastard, who is an 89 potential. So these two have similar potentials to definitely work with as well, but both of them will have a ton of work that will need to be done in the minor leagues before they are truly ready for USBL action. And then the other person of note in this draft class that got in the competitive round B portion of the draft is Logan Larson. And San Diego, they got themselves a catcher last year that is already starting for them, and it could be the same thing for Logan Larson. 73 overall. He's very good at stealing bases, got very good speed. One of those, he's not going to grow all that much, but he can step in and start right away. San Diego doing a good job of getting these kind of starters for their team, so we'll see if they can really grow into all-stars or even superstars. But we'll have to see with this draft class. Then, of course, the San Francisco Seals, who had the 25th selection, but they were a team that they really didn't have that many weaknesses. They really only needed a left fielder. They got that early in Johnny Miller, who 80 potential guy, so really good potential, and they can wait a little bit to bring him up because, I mean, it's a veteran squad. They have a lot of guys ahead of him, so he has no pressure for him to grow. He's going to a great organization, a great situation to reach his full potential. They do also pick up Dion Ortega as well. A little bit higher overall than Johnny Miller and a higher potential as well to go with it. He's going to be a second round pick for the San Francisco Seals and probably their best selection in this draft. So we now go ahead and move on to the AL East, where we see the Baltimore Stone Crabs draft class. And while Brian Fernandez is not the most impressive player on the face of the earth in terms of prospects, they did their work in the latter portions of this draft. Their competitive balance round 8 picks, pretty good, man. Garrett Cooper, for example, he's got really high potential, 87 potential to go with a 61 overall to go with it. He'll need some seasoning, but can become an extremely talented player for the Baltimore Stone Crabs. And then Freddie Skaggs as well. Could be USBL ready day one at that catcher position. They got him with the 20th pick in that same round. He'll even get a bump to potential because, again, it does not make sense for players that have higher overalls than potentials. It makes absolutely zero sense in my mind. And then, not to mention, they got Rich Erdman as well to also join that bullpen. So 2 very good adds for the Baltimore Stone Crabs bullpen for the future. Rich Erdman, 55 overall, so gonna need a few years down in the minors, but watch out for him. He can be special at the USBL level once he is ready to go. The Boston Quakers also had one of the worst records, at least in the first half, although they did a nice job of bouncing back in the second half. So they did pick with the 8th overall selection in this draft, and they did not really have too many competitive balance picks, but they did do a pretty good job drafting with what they did have. They did pick up guys like Charlton Ponson, for example. Got good speed, but needs to work on his general skills. A 94 potential, though. So once they get those skills right, he could become an elite player at the USBL level for sure. And then they also picked up a couple of other players in this draft class that could be pretty interesting. They got Henry Tatum, for example. 87 potential as a relief pitcher. They got him in the competitive round B round. And ton of work that needs to be done. He is not very talented, at least not right now, but he can become something down the line. Same thing could be said for Ramon Crespo. Yes, they picked up 2 starting pitchers. This one has 81 potential. Also, same thing for him. He's going to need some time in the minor leagues, but this could be a very good draft class for the Boston Quakers. The New York Knights, meanwhile, actually had a better draft than what they experienced in season number 1, and a lot of these players are USBL caliber down the line. At least their first 5 picks, got Demetrius Forbes, notably, 89 potential guy, 56 overall, 22 years old from Montana. Don't see a lot of Montana players in the USBL, but he'll be a notable exception. We'll see if he'll be ready for the bright lights that is the New York market. Definitely some pressure there as a player that's going to be the 17th overall pick in this draft. They did also pick up Otto Weston out in left field. Now, he's a guy that going to be relying on his speed early on. He's got 80 speed, 83 stealing, So worst case scenario, this is a guy that you can call up for the sake of having a pinch runner late in games, but really needs developing skills all around. He's not good at the plate, and he's not good in the field as well, but those are things that can easily be worked on. Definitely has some work to do. The Atlanta Barons are definitely in a position where they could be drafting in the top 5 again, and they were picking in the top 5 this year as well. So looking at this draft class, it leaves a lot to be desired. I'm not going to lie to you, this is not a good draft class. Outside of their blue chip prospect that they did get, Luis Ybarra, he is a 65 overall. He is a potential, one of the higher potentials in this draft class. Does come in with that 94 potential, and give him a year or two, he could very well be playing at the USBL level. You never know. The Cleveland Rockers, while they were picking late, they could be in a situation where they're picking early next year, so they definitely needed some help retooling, and didn't necessarily get that in this draft class. They did pick up Jason Hager. He was a second baseman picked up in the round A portion of the competitive balance round. 61 overall, though, could use a couple years in the minors, but he could very well reach his potential and be an all-star caliber player. But other than that, though, that is really the only player of note for Cleveland. This is not a great draft class. Chicago, on the other hand, is in a unique position, given that Chicago, they were picking last in this draft. You know, they are the defending USBL champions, so not a huge emphasis on them drafting. They don't really have a lot of needs. They did find Mitchell Martin, though. He could be playing day 1, could step in for Michael Brantley after this season. Michael Brantley is starting to decline a little bit. They also did pick up John Oda as well. He's borderline ready for USBL action right away, but because of the fact he's on Chicago, he could be somebody that could be used as a trade chip later on. Maybe if they want to try to buy and continue to be in this win now mode that they are in. Ricky Sutter is a pretty good pickup as well. Closing pitcher, could be the heir apparent to Aroldis Chapman someday. 89 potential. He certainly has the ability to be just that if he develops properly in the minors. And then finally, they picked up another reliever in Stefan Rodriguez, and he's also borderline ready right now. Only 76 potential, but a 70 overall. So they picked up 3 USBL caliber players that are ready today. So I love to see that from their drafting. And even if they're not in the USBL level right away, they could be used as trade bait if they want to try to address some positions of weakness down the line if they are in buy mode this season, of course. Up next is the Columbus Jets. They had the 3rd overall selection, but a lot of hype right now for this team as the Columbus Jets. You know, they're actually doing pretty solid this season, and they did pretty solid with this draft as well. At least with their first couple of picks. Their third overall selection going to be Richard Aviles, a potential, but only a 56 overall. Going to need a few years in the minors, but can become a potential star for them. They also got William Ka from South Korea. He's an 83 potential guy, but only a 49 overall. He's got decent speed, 69 speed and stealing. Nice. But definitely needs to work on his all-around abilities for sure. And then beyond that, really the only other player of note is Joe Ulrich, which look at that mustache. That is a beautiful looking mustache. Doesn't have the highest potential, but 67 overall. Can be serviceable right away at the USBL level. And then finally, the last team that I wanted to cover in terms of looking at their draft class is the Pittsburgh Force. Now, Pittsburgh was a team that was picking in the top 9 this season, and probably won't be doing that this year. But that being said, though, they did get Brett Paraffer, a blue chip prospect, 50 overall. Got that 94 potential to go with it as well. A guy that's going to be relying on his speed, but once his skills catch up, oh, he's going to be a special player now. Let me tell you what. But looking at the rest of his draft class, there really is only one other player really of note. Frank Grabovac. He is from Connecticut, 21 years old, and a guy that could play right away. 71 overall, maybe not as a closer necessarily, but can be in the bullpen right away if the Pittsburgh Force do need that kind of help. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him, but that 89 potential does mean he'll be a very good player down the line. So guys, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the Year 2 USBL Draft Special here on MLB For Show 21. And I know it was a really long video, I can definitely understand that. But that being said though, if you enjoyed this content and you did make it all the way to the end of this video, feel free to go ahead, smash that like button. Let me know down in the comments who you think had the best draft this year in this year 2 amateur draft. And then if you also want to have a custom prospect, make sure you go ahead, use the template that's going to be down in the pinned comment section. I will have a pinned comment for that template for you guys to have custom prospects in this up for year number 3. And finally, if you happen to be brand new, you haven't done so already, make sure you go ahead, hit that subscribe button for me. I would truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. But with that being said, this is JohnJake Baseball on the mic signing off. I'm hoping you're all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.